Today, Cyprus has become an attractive destination for business owners and highly qualified professionals from both the European Union and third countries, thanks to its favorable tax and business climate, as well as easy relocation and naturalization. Many individuals moving to Cyprus often have questions about financing a real estate purchase. For instance, can a foreigner obtain a mortgage to buy an apartment or house in Cyprus? What are the current interest rates and down payment requirements? Which banks are willing to lend to foreigners, and how can one avoid common mistakes that lead to mortgage application refusals? Is it possible to purchase real estate using a mortgage while also obtaining a permanent residence permit through investments? In this video, you will find detailed answers to these questions, along with recommendations from a mortgage broker and a licensed real estate valuer. You will also hear from a young couple who shares their personal experience of securing a mortgage. Are you from a big city?
Yes, from St. Petersburg. Living in a city with 6 to 7 million people, I realized I was spending way too much time commuting and not seeing much sun. Since we had a small child, we wanted a healthier, more eco-friendly environment. Cyprus turned out to be one of the clear winners for us. Moving here is actually very easy. The locals are friendly and helpful. Of course, there are certain cultural differences in the way of life, but if you accept that you are moving to another country and approach it with understanding, everything works out very well.
How long did it take to get your mortgage approved?
The pre-approval took about 2 months, mainly because I was trying to negotiate a lower down payment for myself. My initial goal was 25%, but in the end, we settled at 30%. If I'd gone with standard terms, the process could have been much faster, probably around 1 month.
What interest rate did you get?
We went with a bank that wasn't the cheapest. Our rate was 3.55%, fixed for 5 years. There was another option at a different bank with a rate of about 2.85% under similar conditions.
In your opinion, is it better to go to the bank directly or to hire a mortgage broker?
I think it's better to work with a mortgage broker unless you already have strong personal connections with a bank.
To get detailed insights about the mortgage process in Cyprus, I visited the office of Aston Homes and met with Anfisa, a mortgage broker and a representative of leading banks in Cyprus, including the Bank of Cyprus. Which banks today are most open to providing mortgages for foreigners in Cyprus?
In general, all banks in Cyprus work with foreign clients, but in our practice, the main players are Bank of Cyprus and Hellenic Bank, which will soon become part of Eurobank.
What are the current mortgage interest rates in Cyprus?
To everyone's pleasant surprise, rates are now moving towards 3%. Just a year ago, we were talking about 6.2 to 6.5%, which at the time seemed acceptable. But today, we are already at around 3%. The trend is still downward. By the end of the year, we expect to see rates around 2.5% at banks like Bank of Cyprus and Eurobank.
Send us a message and we will share the most up-to-date mortgage rates available on the exact day you are watching this video. What is the size of the down payment required by separate banks for getting a mortgage?
For residents of Cyprus who are citizens of third countries and have lived on the island for less than 2 years, the down payment is usually around 40%. If the same residents have lived in Cyprus for more than 2 years, but less than 10, the down payment is 30%. And if residents have lived here for more than 10 years, or if they are EU citizens, or already Cypriot citizens, the down payment is just 20%.
How much time does it usually take to get a mortgage approved in Cyprus?
Compared to last year, the time frame has shortened. Today, it usually takes about 6 weeks, while 3 or 4 years ago, the process could take 3 to 4 months. This is because many procedures are now digitalized, so fewer documents need to be submitted manually. At the same time, bank offices themselves are working faster and more efficiently. One factor that still influences the timeline is the independent property valuation. Banks work with licensed valuers, certified by ETEK or RICS, who visit the property, carry out their assessment, and deliver a report to the bank. Sometimes this process takes longer than the expected 2 to 3 days, which can delay the approval. But even here, Banks try to work with partners who are both reliable and fast.
What documents do you need to provide to the bank to apply for a mortgage?
The checklist usually has around 12 points, split into two main categories. The first group relates to the borrower. They must provide documents confirming their residency status. You don't necessarily have to be a Cypriot resident, but if you are a resident of another country, the conditions may be slightly stricter. Then, proof of income. If you're employed, that's your employment contract. If you own a company and are a shareholder, you'll need to show documents related to dividend withdrawals and the country in which they are paid. For those already living and working in Cyprus, banks will also ask for Form IR63 and payslips, showing your official net salary after tax. In addition, the borrower must provide a personal financial statement listing monthly household expenses. A special note for Israeli citizens. At the moment, Hellenic Bank provides some flexibility for this category, allowing income to be shown in shekels. Typically, in Cyprus, however, income must be demonstrated in euros. The second group relates to the property. The required documents include architectural plans signed by the architect, planning permit for initial construction, building permit for final approval of construction, proof of financing if the project is still under development. If it's a completed project, then the title deed for the land and for the property itself. The list is a bit longer, but these are the most important items.
In the description of this video, you'll find a link to download a sample checklist of documents required by one of the largest banks in Cyprus. But I strongly recommend contacting me or Aston Homes, joining one of our upcoming mortgage seminars, or scheduling a personal consultation. That way, you will get a complete, personalized list of documents tailored to your specific situation. Did you manage to reach a situation where your mortgage payments are actually lower than the rent for a similar apartment?
In our case, the mortgage installments are about 80% of what the monthly rent for a similar property would cost.
You can definitely expect your payments to be lower than the monthly rent, especially if you look at the current rental market situation in Limassol and other cities in Cyprus. The only real challenge is saving up that initial down payment. That's difficult for many young professionals and families here, given the high cost of living in Cyprus. But once you manage to put together the down payment, taking a mortgage is absolutely worth it. I speak from personal experience. I have several mortgages myself, and my housing costs dropped by almost half. Of course, you do end up paying interest because it's still a loan, but since your monthly housing expenses are much lower compared to renting, it's very advantageous in the short term. And at the same time, you're paying for your own property. It's not just a place to live, it's also a financial instrument, a liquid asset you can later sell, refinance, or pass on as inheritance.
What are the expenses associated with getting a mortgage in Cyprus? Are there any hidden costs we should know about?
Yes, definitely. The most significant hidden costs are the insurance, and there are two of them. First, life insurance for the borrower, and second, property insurance. Few people realize that both of these must be paid every single year for the entire duration of the mortgage. Another expense is the property valuation. The borrower pays for the valuation, which must be updated every 2 years at their expense. For example, a valuation for a 2-bedroom apartment today costs about €250, and you'll need to repeat that every 2 years.
If I have already agreed with the developer and made an initial payment, say 30, 40, even 50% of the property price, and only after that I apply to the bank for a mortgage, can that advance payment to the developer be counted as a down payment for the mortgage?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I'd say this is the best strategy. It's better to transfer the down payment directly to the developer. Why? The KYC process on the developer's side is usually much easier than the bank's KYC process. So this approach works well. The only important thing is, before signing the contract with the developer and transferring any significant sums, make sure the agreement states that your payment is refundable if the bank refuses to grant the mortgage.
So, if I understand correctly, in Cyprus it's possible to include a clause in the reservation agreement that allows you to cancel the deal if the mortgage is not approved by the bank.
Yes, that's right. This right is used not at the stage of signing the final contract and paying a large sum, but at the reservation stage. Typically, the reservation is valid for 1.5 to 2 months. enough time to get an official response from the bank. If the only reason for canceling the deal is that the bank refused the mortgage, then the deposit is refunded. In 99% of cases, developers agree to this condition.
What was the main focus for the bank when they reviewed your application?
The most important factor for the bank was our intention to live on the island long term. They looked at how long we had already lived here, whether we were known to them, and what kind of activity was on our accounts. They were very interested in whether we planned to stay in Cyprus after taking the mortgage. We also had to demonstrate our professional achievements and our integration into the local community. In my case, by the time I applied, I'd already passed the language exam and the history and culture exam. I explained my intention to apply for a Cypriot passport this year, which was a strong argument for the bank. Of course, if you go with the standard down payment terms, most of this is not so critical. The main thing is the source of funds. But if you're hoping for special conditions, then you really need to show a deeper connection with the island.
What difficulties did you face when dealing with the bank and in getting a mortgage in general?
Honestly, we didn't really face many difficulties thanks to the agent who accompanied us to the bank. The developer we chose had a solid reputation and was well regarded by the bank. Suppose we had gone with a smaller developer. In that case, we would likely have had issues, things like preparing documents, the bank's assessment of the company itself, or evaluating its long-term prospects. But luckily, we managed to avoid those challenges.
From your experience, at which stages do clients most often face difficulties with getting a mortgage?
Most often, right at the very beginning. Clients usually pick a property first and only think about the mortgage process afterwards. That often leads to complications. Many people don't realistically assess their financial capacity. For example, banks usually require at least a 30 to 40% down payment. For some reason, many clients in Cyprus believe they can push the bank into accepting 25%. But that's not how it works. Banks have strict rules and regulations, and these can't be bypassed by negotiation. That's why we always recommend clarifying your financial situation with a mortgage broker or directly with the bank from the very start and preparing a proper down payment. Another key point, the down payment must be money that's already in a bank account, and it must be officially transferred either to the developer's account or to your own account at the bank, where the mortgage will be issued. Cash savings or cryptocurrency will not be accepted. This is why it's so important to meet with the bank early on and confirm whether your source of funds is acceptable. The third common issue is that some clients assume any property can be financed with a mortgage. But in practice, certain developers don't work with mortgages. They don't want to wait. They won't provide the necessary project documentation, and they aren't open to cooperation with the banks. Clients lose valuable time if they don't check this in advance. Mortgage brokers usually know exactly which developers are mortgage-friendly and which are not. When it comes to resale properties, most of them can be financed with a mortgage. However, there's another issue: undervaluation. Sellers can ask any price they want, but when the bank's valuer comes in, especially for older, less energy-efficient homes, the valuation often comes in much lower. This creates a gap between the seller's expectations and the bank's assessment. That's why it's always smart to check with your mortgage broker first, to understand whether the property is likely to pass valuation smoothly or if there might be problems.
To avoid any issues with your mortgage application or the valuation of your chosen property, feel free to contact us. You can also join our next mortgage seminar or schedule a one-on-one consultation. All the details are in the description below. Property valuation is one of the key stages of getting a mortgage. The outcome of the valuation directly affects not only whether the bank will approve your loan, but also the amount you can borrow. To better understand what influences a valuation and how to approach choosing the right property, I met with an independent valuer.
Valuations is about managing risk. And also valuations is about clarity for sellers, buyers and lenders.
How to choose a property to have better valuation and greater chances to get a mortgage?
I will say it's not about to choose a property to have better chances. It's about to make your study before you buy. for the new properties, from my experience, most of the times the market valuation meets the asking price. Not always, but most of the times. The resale apartment is going to be for sale by a private owner, not by a developer. This private owner who is selling an apartment might wants to sell it at the market value. He might wants to sell it over market value. The one who is going to give the clarification is the valuer. So when the buyer goes to the bank to ask for a loan, the valuer will give the real market valuation. The valuation is based on data. The valuation is based on international valuation standards. It's about science. The asking price is about the personal opinion of someone. We have seen before a lot of times one buyer to be willing to pay double the price because he has the emotion to buy it for his own reason. He pays an X amount, which from our point of view is above the market price, but on the other hand, the buyer, he's happy because he was willing to pay more to buy this specific property. But this is not the market price. The market price is the price that a group of people will offer to buy it, not one specific buyer.
From your experience, what is the loan to value ratio here in Cyprus?
The banks, they have their own policy giving the ratio. It starts from 60 going to 80%, always depends on the profile of the client.
What is the most important matters for valuation?
When we receive instructions from a bank, from a lender to provide them with an independent opinion, with a valuation report, we as valuers decide which method is appropriate. The most common method in Cyprus is the comparative, based on the location, based on the condition, based on the quality, based on other important factors which are affecting the area, based on the infrastructure of the area, and based on the new developments in the future for the area. The bank is always consider the liquidity of a property. What is liquidity? How fast they are going to sell the apartment in case that the loan is becoming not performing. The banks, they always ask from us to check their environmental parameters of a property. One of the environmental parameters is the flood. For example, a property is adjacent to a river, so we have always the risk for any incident, so we have to take into account this specific parameter. They always check the energy performance of a property, is very important for them. A property has to be completed according to the architectural drawings, and most important for the bank is about the planning status. A property which has been completed some years ago has to be fully secured with a final permit, which means that has been completed according to the terms of the planning permission, which is according to the architectural plans, and everything for this property is legal. We have seen that the buyers nowadays, they are very careful of considering the planning status of a property. Its license, it's final approved by the authorities, and everything is clean for the purposes of the mortgage. In addition, very important for the buyer to consider before buying is to assess the legal and technical status of the property, which is the due diligence. A lawyer or an engineer should make the study together with the valuation with us, so Three studies are important, is the technical, legal, and valuation.
And in terms of the quality, if I buy my first apartment here in Cyprus, should I go for a new build or look something on the secondary market?
The advantages in buying a new apartment is about the name of the developer, is about the trust, is about the time, because buying a resale apartment, it means it needed more time for renovation to be ready for your own standards. But buying a new apartment which might be fully furnished and provide you more security, because nowadays the new developers are following specific standards. They are following the highest quality. So from my point of view, a buyer looking for a new apartment is more secure.
Is it better to buy a new apartment or something on the resale market?
A new one, because I don't want to inherit someone else's ants.
But ants won't come into a brand new apartment, will they?
You just have to be ready for that.
What else did you pay attention to when choosing your apartment?
For me, it was things like underfloor heating and definitely the quality of the kitchen, what materials it was built from.
Here in Cyprus, there's a lot of older housing stock mixed in with brand new developments. So for me, one of the most important factors when choosing an area was aesthetics, how everything looks together, and of course the view.
What are the most safe areas in Limassol?
City centers, the city centers. The areas outside city centers, they are always on risk in regards to the fires. And we have the recent example, a lot of houses in Cyprus, they are burned. Okay, we are not ready as a state to handle all these situations, but we have to take into account all these risks.
Do we have any risks here in Gemassoia area?
In Gemassoia, we have a dam, a big dam, to the north of the village. And all the houses which are built along the river going to the sea, they have the more risk for any flood event.
So when should a client go directly to a bank? And when does it make sense to hire a mortgage broker?
If a client already has a strong and easy relationship with their banker, if they live in Cyprus and have no difficulties communicating in Greek or English, if they understand the financial world well and can easily navigate the bank's website to check interest rates and mortgage programs, then, in many cases, they can deal with the bank directly. The same applies if the client already knows exactly which property they want, doesn't need market comparisons, fully understands liquidity and market trends, or doesn't care about financial metrics and just wants this property here and now. In that case, they don't necessarily need a mortgage broker. But if the client wants a broader understanding of the market, for example, how much they might later resell or rent out the property for, then a broker is invaluable. If their communication with bankers isn't that strong, they want professional support when discussing serious financial matters, or if they want someone to explain in detail the different repayment options, not only the standard repayment structure that the bank might suggest, but also alternatives like annuity payments that can lower monthly installments from the very beginning and spread them more evenly over the life of the loan. In short, if a client wants more support, clarity, and guidance through all of these nuances, then working with a mortgage broker is not just helpful, but really valuable, both for advice and for managing the whole process.
Please guide me on the initial steps and preparations needed to secure a mortgage in Cyprus.
The first step is, of course, to go and meet with several bankers from different banks. Ideally, you should speak with at least 3 banks, because each of them will offer slightly different conditions. This way, you'll get feedback, understand what the initial down payment will be, and already make a preliminary calculation of your monthly repayments, based on the maximum budget the bank is ready to approve, depending on your down payment. The second step is to define what exactly you want to finance with the mortgage. And this is not always simple, especially when the budget is quite large, let's say over 300,000 euros. Then we can look not only at apartments, but also maisonettes, townhouses, detached houses, bungalows, and even offices if you are considering a more commercial, investment-driven purchase. Here you really need to ask yourself, do I want this property for living? For how long? Am I planning to resell it? By answering these questions, you'll get the perfect picture of the type of property that will fully match your goals. For example, if the choice is a 2-bedroom flat in a residential neighborhood, I recommend comparing the resale market with new developments. After living in Cyprus for 15 years, I am a fan of new builds. I know how aggressive the natural environment is here. The salty sea breeze always damages building facades. That's why I recommend buying a new or almost new property and then reselling it after about 15 years. That's my golden investment standard. Accordingly, I usually recommend taking a mortgage for around 15 years. When you take a longer loan, the interest rate is typically a bit higher. And by the time you finish paying off the mortgage, the property can already be resold, and you can reinvest into other projects. Once you have chosen the property, let's say it's a new build from a developer, it's very important to carefully look at the sales contract. There are 3 main points I always pay attention to in the legal documents. First, the penalty clauses, in case the project is not completed on time after the grace period. Second, the warranty period for all internal and external works. I always recommend at least 12 months, so that the property passes through 1 full year, both heat and rain, to make sure the building is solid, doesn't leak, and doesn't crack. Third, the guarantee on the facade. Yes, there is the Law 224, which regulates how long the structure must last. But I personally always ask developers for a 10-year guarantee that the facade will stand without problems. And finally, let's not forget about timing. In 2026, Cyprus is expected to join the Schengen area, making it a strong alternative for individuals from third countries currently residing in Spain, Italy, or Germany, where the tax climate is less favorable. Many experts predict property prices in Cyprus will rise once this happens. This means that right now is the best time to buy property with a mortgage, as prices are still more accessible.
Suppose you are interested in getting a mortgage to buy a property in Cyprus. In that case, I recommend attending one of our upcoming mortgage seminars or scheduling an individual consultation with Aston Homes. You can find all the information in the video description. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps promote my videos on YouTube and motivates me to create more content. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in Cyprus.